If you are particularly intrigued by Africa, there is one region that you cannot ignore, for it is the most mysterious and ancient civilization to ever have iron. This has been carbon dated and proven. What exactly is this country? Where exactly is this place? And why is it located deep somewhere in Africa instead of the several many places around the world that utilized iron? Well, the land I'm talking about is firstly Nigeria, located in West Africa. Particularly, these sites are in Enugu State. In Enugu State, there are at least four sites of iron that go back far beyond most dates around the world. Lejja is the oldest at 2000 BC, and then there's Suga and several more, which we will talk about. Why exactly is Lejja so important? Well, it's how it was discovered. See, Lejja has been known for a while now, a couple of decades, that it has the oldest iron that has been fully confirmed and peer reviewed. Not only is it the most intriguing site in the world because of this factor alone, but it's also the most intriguing site in southeastern region of West Africa. 2000 BC is not just an interesting time because it is far away from the colonial period of Africa, but it's also far away from the influential period of any other region outside of West Africa.
Lejja is a village in Igbo land, southeastern Nigeria, which has lots of iron-working remains that have been investigated archaeologically. The vast number of slag blocks on the surface reveals that ironworking in this region was a highly sophisticated, long-lived, and well-developed tradition with its own techniques that involve fairly large-scale iron production dating to 3000 BC.
But it's not just interesting compared to places outside of Africa. It's also interesting compared to sites inside of Africa. For example, the Nok culture. When we look at the Nok culture, we can determine that it's one of the earliest civilizations in Africa, period. But this culture is not a standalone culture. There are several other sites now that have been found to have iron at the same time as the Nok culture, which is about 1500 BC. This 1500 BC date, which is very old, again, is rivaled by the Lejja areas. The Lejja areas being the oldest, and then the Nsuka being the second oldest, but the same as the Nok to the north. The Knock, obviously, with their art and everything else, makes them stand alone even more. This area here in Nigeria is simply put the foundation of African iron, and every other civilization in Africa or society in Africa, that word is more appropriate, would be thankful for the people who created the iron works first in those regions. There is still a very long question of how and why it was built directly in that particular region. What grew from those places? Because the caves don't seem to be particularly unique. And jumping from stone to iron is very strange indeed, and it didn't happen in any other part of Africa, even down south of this region, which must have been influenced by it, where the Bantu people are. Of course, the Bantu people borrowed the culture from these people. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a few things into perspective. Remember, some of the burial mounds found in some of the earliest places in history are located just northwest of Nigeria. And so in this particular region, we find a very similar but very different culture here, showing an expansion of cultures. Now, the culture found in this specific region in Nigeria is very old indeed, going back to Anjuku and things like that. These are the results of the study. This study gives evidence of early iron melting working in pre-colonial period in northern Igbo communities. Pitbull furnaces is believed to be the earliest furnace and iron smelting technology that was extensively deployed in Opi, Lejja, and Nwofe, which produces the giant slags not yet reported elsewhere in Nigeria. Remember, this was early. These sites are contemporaneous with, but not earlier than the Knox sites, notwithstanding the radiocarbon date of 2000 BC iron smelting site of Lejja in Nsukka area. Eza Uzomaka 2009, Poll 2010 has however expressed some reservations on the ledger date from the available evidence. It could be agreed that the northern Igbo land in Soka area in particular assumed one of the most important centers of iron smelting technology in Nigeria. This fact was achieved by possibly itinerant iron workers that moved from one location to another based on availability of raw materials, hematite ore, and hard wood for charcoal making. For better understanding of the impact of early ironworking, the issues of origins, according to Poe, need to be de-emphasized because of its implicit racial and or ethnic superiority instead of the socio-cultural as well as economic contexts should be explored. This would yield more significant benefit to human societies and understanding of intergroup relations within and between various societies. With all the many portrayals of Nigeria as an Islamic or Christian region in both television and everywhere around the world, we seem to always forget that this place at this time would have been practicing animism. So these people are neither Christian nor none of that. Of course, 2000 BC, we're talking way before Jesus was even born, which I think is a factor that is hard to understand because timeline wise, we need to chart all of that down, what that really means timeline wise. Because if we don't get that down, then we will never fully understand. These dates make sense, of course, if you take other people from outside of the world and their dates going back and forth. So it was thought at one time that if we find a place around the world that is the oldest region to have iron outside of the Americas, but if we were to find one in Europe or Asia or somewhere, that we could just assume that all places in the world got their iron directly from that kingdom and it just spread somehow. But seeing that this area of Africa was the first to have it, and only a couple hundred years later, people around the world started getting it, it was not accepted. It is not accepted that this place, instead of just being an independent area of iron creation, it's not accepted as this is where iron started. Traders from North Africa probably took it and then sent it to places like Egypt. And from Egypt, it went to Europe and then it went around the world. Now, possibly not even Egypt, because Egypt got a little later as well. But at the same time, this is not the narrative. This tells you about the asymmetry of historical writings, where in Africa it has to be non influential a little bit. And I feel there's a strong part of that. Now, part of it is techniques utilized in Africa that you don't really see outside of the regions. Uh, if you care to, I could make a video about the difference between the metal cultures of Africa and the outsiders. So I want to paint the picture a little bit of what this place would have looked like. These stone structures, in order to have ironwork, in order to have woodwork and wooden doors, which have now dissolved, but we can imagine that they are the same as the others that you would see in Igbo land in general. Oh, yeah, this place is Igbo land, by the way. The ones that you would see in general in these regions, you need a sort of workshop site. So don't in your head, don't just imagine that these things materialize by magic. People are working on the site. They congregate together in one area to achieve. It seems small if you think about it today. Okay, somebody building iron somewhere. You just need a furnace. You need a few things. You need to go get the ore. You need to go get the other minerals. A lot of things in order to get it going would really, but and this is where it comes together as a civilization that is different mentally. Firstly, it is not majority matrilineal like most African societies. If you go to North Africa, when you start dealing with the tribes there, the Black Berbers in those regions, you start to get matrilineal. The light-skinned Berbers that exist to this day in that region are also matrilineal. You go down to the Bantu regions, you find nothing but matrilineal. But in here, there's a mix of societies, patrilineal and matrilineal, and they have names for both. As we read, Ohafia people are an Igbo group or clan of 26 villages and towns of varying sizes, most of which trace their ancestry to a common ancestor in Uduma, Ezama, Atita. Thus, the people are referred to as Ohafia, Uduma, Ezama. The traditional Ohafia society did not constitute a single centralized polity. It was instead composed of villages, republics, united into a unique commonwealth cemented by the people's wonderful matrilineal family arrangements. It is doubtful whether Ohafia is truly a matrilineal society rather than a double descent society. The main thrust of this study was to examine the relevance of kinship systems in Ohafia, traditional society from the pre-colonial, colonial, and contemporary periods. The study in its findings noted that in Ohafia, the kinship system is so encompassing that quite often it provides the channel through which almost all the rights and obligations of individual members are mediated. This society relationship called kinship exists between those who come from the same ancestral mother called Ikune, mother's side. Just a quick pointer, this might be a coincidence, but the word unina in Zulu means mother, and I wonder if it's related to this word here. So let's keep reading. So those who come from the same ancestral mother called Ikuene, by the way, Iku means side, Ne means mother, and those who come from the same ancestral fathers called Umudi, father side. In Ohafia context, Igune and Umudi are what is referred to as matrilineal family and patrilineal family, respectively. The kinship system, Iku, has been the foundation, essence, blood, spirit, and the vehicle for social, religious, political, cultural, and economic development or Hafia traditional society despite the challenges of the system. So next time you think about African civilizations anywhere in West Africa or even Central to South Africa, remember the people that brought us those civilizations in the way that they are today.
Thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe. And remember, these people were polygamists as well. I don't know if I added that in there.